Hello, and a warm Mancunian welcome to all my incredible listeners out there. I'm Deepa Thomas Sutcliffe, your friendly host, and you've just tuned into the 6th season of the Meet the Mancunian podcast, where I share remarkable social impact stories from the heart of Manchester every Tuesday throughout the season. This podcast is a celebration of the unsung heroes, the change makers, and the passionate souls who are making a real difference in our vibrant city. From social enterprises to non-profits and community groups, I bring you the voices of worker bees and volunteers, all coming together for a common cause. Through heartfelt conversations, my guests share their experiences, dreams, and unwavering commitment to making a difference. From the challenges they've overcome to the triumphs that fuel their passion, their stories will leave you moved, enlightened, and brimming with hope. Join me on this audio adventure as my guests and I explore the transformative power of collective action and the remarkable impact we can create when we unite for a common cause. Their tales are a testament to the power of community, collaboration, and the indomitable Mancunian spirit. They not only address pressing issues right here in Manchester, but also offer insights and inspiration that resonate far beyond these boundaries. So whether you're commuting, on a run, or just relaxing at home, I invite you to tune in on Apple, Spotify, Google, or any of your favorite podcasting platforms. You can also log on to my website www.meetthemancunian.co.uk. Let's embark on this journey of discovery and inspiration. For my new listeners, you can catch up on the incredible stories from the first 5 seasons at www.meetthemancunian.co.uk, where you'll also find out more about my own journey as a podcaster. And to all my returning listeners, I can't thank you enough for your support. You make this podcast possible, and I'm immensely grateful. So join me as I continue to share these inspiring tales of change and community support from the beating heart of Manchester. Together, we can spread a bit of good news, spark meaningful conversations, and inspire positive action. Thank you for being a part of the Meet the Mancunian community. Welcome to the second episode of Season 6 of the Meet the Mancunian podcast, Social Impact Stories from Manchester. Passionate about creating social value? We hear from Matt Richardson, Social Value Lead, Growth Company, and Chair, Greater Manchester Social Value Network. I'm delighted to introduce my guest, Matt Richardson, Social Value Lead, Growth Company, and Chair, Greater Manchester Social Value Network. Thanks so much, Matt, for taking the time.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
Tell us first about your passion for supporting the community. Where did that start?
I think that's probably come from my mum, from seeing her retrain in her 40s to become an occupational therapist. Has always looked after people. Has always an extremely caring person. Worked evenings, weekends to support me and my brother as well. So I think that element of trying to support people, and if you've got an opportunity to do so, then take it. I think that's where it's come from, really.
That's really interesting. What exactly does the term social value refer to? That's always an interesting term that I looked up online and I found differing interpretations. So it'll be really helpful if you could explain to our listeners.
Yeah, I think it doesn't help when you see lots of different definitions. For me, what social value means to me is how can, whatever you're doing, whatever decisions you make, whether it's operations within your job, tasks, activities, how much of that activity can be squeezed to benefit either you, your neighbours, your colleagues, your friends, businesses you work with, the community you're based in. How can those activities be thought out to squeeze as much value out of those as possible and much impact? I often use the analogy where you have a stone, you throw it into the middle of the pond. That stone is the activity or whatever it is you're doing. How far can we stretch those ripples once that stone has hit that water? And how can we maximise that stone? Ultimately, we want to try and make the biggest splash, for want of a better phrase, to improve that activity and improve that impact for everybody.
And can you give us an example?
Sure. I think from my nature of working within business support, I think I would often say to businesses, how can you review how you're supporting your staff? Are you paying the real living wage for your staff? Do you offer training opportunities for your staff? Do you offer flexible work? And obviously, off the back of COVID now, do people have the opportunity to work from home, or do they work flexibly if they've got care responsibilities at home? How can all these things that can intertwine a day-to-day working life can make people's lives easier? And if people feel more confident in work, feel more relaxed in work, you're ultimately going to get the best from people in work as well.
Thanks so much for sharing that. So you're working mostly with enterprises rather than with employees directly. Is that
That's correct. So I work for the Growth Company. So the Growth Company is a social enterprise. I've been running for over 30 years now, predominantly within Greater Manchester, but we cover all areas of the north and have got sites all across the country. Main areas that we focus on are three specific notes. So we cover business support, we look at education and skills, and we look at recruitment and employment services as well.
Thanks for sharing that, Matt. And I'm ready to know how you got involved with the Greater Manchester Social Value Network. Tell us more about that.
Sure. So when I became a social value lead for the Growth Company over 3 years ago now, I was introduced to the Social Value Network. The Social Value Network itself had been running for a number of years before I arrived. And it's ultimately to try and harness collaboration within Greater Manchester for the benefit of Greater Manchester. So bringing organisations together, whether it's the private sector, public sector, voluntary community sector, and bringing those skills and experiences together to leverage change for the better of residents within the region. I think looking at things around how we can support policy development, obviously looking at Greater Manchester Combined Authority's social value policy, looking at the social value framework within the area as well, how we can shape how businesses in particular can support the social value agenda. But ultimately, it's a group of like-minded people trying to drive the social value agenda within the area.
Thank you. That does sound like they're doing some really great work, and it's great that you can bring different organizations together. And then you also volunteer with Careers and Enterprise Company. Tell us about that.
I do. I think probably in my entire career, I've worked with young people. It's the most rewarding thing I've ever done. I used to be a sports coach many years ago, so that's how I got into my first couple of jobs. I used to work in schools around Salford predominantly, working at school clubs, holiday clubs, then I went into full-time education, worked in prisons, colleges, etc. And that really helped shape my ability to work with different audiences and having to tailor your communication style for different audiences. And from there, I went into working for a national drug and alcohol charity, which really gave me an insight into social prescribing. In essence, social prescribing in terms of trying to reduce the pressures on primary healthcare, the NHS, etc., and how can we look at alternative therapies or behaviour change to support people's healthy lifestyles, so more exercise, improvement around nutrition and diet. And then I was delivering a number of health and wellbeing programmes for various services around the country and talking about workplace wellbeing and the impact of that. And then that's where I came to the Business Growth Hub, that is an entity of the Growth Company, and would then start to work with businesses around how they can improve staff wellbeing, employee engagement. There's still a lot of work that needs to be done in that area. It then led me to working with businesses. Obviously, I then wasn't able to work with young people anymore, so I was missing that bit that I really enjoyed. So an opportunity came up to work with the Careers and Enterprise Company, which was in essence initiated as a matchmaking service, really, trying to engage volunteers to get matched with a high school within Greater Manchester. And you would then work with that school's careers advisor or staff member who's looking after the careers curriculum and how you could develop that careers curriculum for the students. So I've worked with Oasis Academy in Media City in Salford. And for people listening may or may not be aware, it's also where BBC and ITV are based, which if you look out of that window of the school, looks great. And if you look out of the opposite window, it's in Odsall, which is one of the most deprived areas in Salford. There's a high percentage of parents that don't work. There's a high percentage of students who have never even left Salford, which blows my mind sometimes, thinking around the impacts of social mobility. The fact that they've never even been into the city centre before just is baffling, really, and that just can't happen for young people. So I've worked with them voluntarily to try and bring in businesses, get young people exposed to the different type of jobs that are available to people. Because unless young people see the types of jobs that are out there, they're never going to know what's available. And the more exposure they get to different types of roles, the different sectors, what workplaces start to look like, it can then start to raise aspirations of those young people. So appreciate that was a long-winded way of getting round to how I got into that role.
That's really interesting. And it's nice that you were missing working with young people. And I really like what you said you're doing, because I did something very similar with charity in India, where they were helping children in the slums find positive role models through mentoring and job placement, and really helping them take those first steps. Many of them were going to college for the very first time in their whole families, many generations of people who hadn't been widely educated. Exactly like you said, if you don't know what the opportunities are, you'll think you need to do the work that your parents did.
Absolutely. I think over COVID, I've massively impacted volunteering, engagement, everything, as we all know, which in this instance, had a huge effect on the young people not being able to go to workplaces, see what they were like, because everybody was working from home. We then had to use technology such as this for businesses to dial in, which is great, but the young people still don't necessarily get to see what workplaces were like. It was still something, but it just made me open my eyes to, we'd focused on businesses that were local to that school because it was a case of the students can walk there, they can see what the businesses look like. But actually, really, the use of technology meant we could, in essence, if we wanted to, reach out to any company in the world and have a call. And we did just that with quite a number of organisations. One of the most meaningful was somebody, young guys, and he was 25, 26 at the time. And he actually didn't talk to the young people about anything to do with his job. He spoke about, he was originally from Manchester, he was around 21, 22, and he moved to Dubai. Career opportunity came out there. But he spoke to young people around the decision-making process of moving to another country, understanding a new culture, understanding a new language, starting from scratch around his own social networks. And you can just see the light bulbs go off with the young people of somebody's walked that path and what the decisions were that took them to that. And the young people found it very inspiring, as did I. And I think it just makes you think about sometimes the confines we put ourselves in, or young people in, when actually there's things that are a little bit further afield that might be of use to them as well.
Absolutely. Again, it's about opening up to new opportunities and showing the way, as one young man shared. What are the challenges that you faced in this wider journey of yours of championing social value? It must not be always easy.
I'd probably say, from my perspective of being in a social value lead role, and I'm sure anyone who is in a similar role, it can be quite a lonely role at times. I think in our organisation, we've got 1,500 plus members of staff. Big part of my role is looking for advocates within the organisation to help that change, because it can't just be myself in an organisation that drives that. So looking for advocates, looking for champions. We have an internal social value steering group. So I've got various staff from across the organisation. We meet once a month and look at the key agendas for the organisation and how we can leverage our participation in those agendas over the next couple of months. How can we be more robust as an organisation moving forward? We are a social enterprise, as I've mentioned, so we need to ensure we are doing what we say we are doing and ensuring that our decisions impact our staff, our suppliers, our customers, our communities right through the process. I think what I find for businesses or organisations in particular is a lot of organisations do social value, they just don't call it social value. And I see this all the time. And I think sometimes that's around buzzwords that the sectors often use or the business community use, and it can be very confusing. So CSR, corporate social responsibility, what it used to be called, which people still call now, social value, social impact, the introduction of ESG, environment, social and governance. And even for someone who is in this role day to day, it can be confusing at times. So I do have a lot of sympathy for people who are trying to understand it because it's confused. The problem with that is if it's confusing, people perhaps leave it alone, and then it's stunting the progress of the social value agenda generally. Whereas I think if we just spoke about thinking about your activity and your operations and just being more socially responsible on a day-to-day basis, I think that would help massively. Because there's so many tools out there to help you measure impact, which again, I think can be very confusing for a lot of people. We've got tools that work with specific sectors. You've got tools that work with specific sizes. And I just think it can be very confusing for people. Reach out to somebody or reach out to a community, reach out to a network, see what others have done previously and see what they use. Because as much as We want to drive social value. Obviously, if you're in a business community, you also want to look at how you're reporting on that, how you're monitoring that to ensure that it's doing as we envisaged it would do. So I think really looking at the tools and techniques to help you manage that impact is really key, but it is very confusing. This is a shameless plug for our organisation, but there are organisations out there who are experts in this space that can support listening to podcasts such as this, watching YouTube videos, just all help bring people's knowledge to this subject up to the fore, really.
Interestingly, the way I say it's Meet the Mancunian social impact stories from Manchester. So I don't use social value, I use social impact. So again, like you said, there are many ways to talk about people doing good for the community and the environment.
It would be a lot easier if we said, just do good. Honestly, I think it would be a lot easier if just do good. Think about what you do. What's the impact of that?
That's true. And what impact would you say you've made so far? And I'm happy for you to take this with your volunteering work or with
Sure.
your social value work as you think is best.
I think anybody listening who's maybe thinking about getting into this area or thinking about what they can do to give back, I think my work with the schools has shifted slightly. So I mentioned earlier that I often bring businesses or organisations into a school or take students to a workplace. It's shifted because that isn't necessarily sustainable. I can't keep bringing different businesses in. Ultimately, the school needs to take accountability for that. My role has now changed within the school, looking at the overall careers curriculum, now involved in the design of the curriculum and using labour market intelligence of what businesses are telling us to help shape the curriculum moving forward, which I think is huge, really, because I think it's an opportunity for the data that local authorities capture, that the business community capture, to bring that to the forefront of schools and how they can intertwine that with the careers curriculum that they deliver. One of the ideas that we did was we brought in a number of businesses to support with that careers curriculum. So it's first-hand education and business working together rather than a gulf, which we often see, where education is teaching X, Y, and Z, and actually the business community needs A, B, and C. And there's a disconnect between the both. I think having those conversations between both initiatives, like I mentioned earlier, just make a huge difference in tying all that together. And ultimately, it's for the benefit of the young people, which is what everyone is trying to achieve.
Thank you so much for sharing that. That is really interesting. Absolutely. It's great to hear about the impact you're making. Now, how can interested people reach out to you and learn more? Where can they find you online?
I often post quite a lot on LinkedIn. I often think, what would I want to see if I was looking to understand a little bit more about social value? So I'll often put articles that I find useful. So it's not always necessarily posts that our organisation are doing and good stories that we are doing. Yes, that's a part of it, but I'm also keen to share what I've learned in my journey. And if it can help someone through the information that I share, then that's a benefit, really.
Thank you. And that brings me to what advice do you have for people looking to start something similar in another part of the world or another part of the UK?
Try and take as many opportunities as possible. From my perspective, the last 10 years has been about grasping as many opportunities as I can, regardless of where it went. It might be short-lived, but it was opportunities and it was experience all the same. It might have been to work on a specific project, to volunteer on a specific project. I want to make very clear to your audience that all the opportunities I've taken up have been a real passion of mine. And I think that's important. That's what can help drive the impact even further. If you're interested in something, it can be very difficult if you're going against the grain and trying to do something that benefits, but there's also that goal of you want to be able to get something out of it as well for your own well-being and feel like you're giving something back. If opportunities aren't necessarily in your periphery, reaching out to organisations, volunteering opportunities, you'd be hard-pressed to find someone who doesn't want to give back to a community. The challenge is often, where do I go and do that? So I think reaching out to local infrastructure organisations within Manchester, GMCVO, which is the regional-based infrastructure organisation, but each of the 10 local authorities in Greater Manchester all have their own VCSE infrastructure organisation that can help with that. We often see that with the business community. Staff want to give back. I would also argue sometimes, I think within businesses in particular, in corporate volunteering, I appreciate I can potentially get on my soapbox about this, so apologies. I think there's a case to be had for staff within organisations to really think about the tasks that they do on a day-to-day basis that may seem quite mundane or autopilot. Small community groups, organisations do not have the resources to access those skills and expertise. So do try and match what you do on a day-to-day basis for organisations. It may seem like, well, who's going to find this useful? But I can assure you there will be organisations out there, whether it's business strategy, putting posters together, a marketing campaign, social media, anything like that, there will be organisations that can help. So please do think about what you do on a day-to-day basis, because that will provide an extreme amount of value, and please don't underestimate how important that could be.
Thank you. Those are really great tips, and absolute shout out to volunteering. I also find that very useful both within the organizations you work with, if they encourage it. Some organizations give you volunteering days, which is really great, or some
Yeah.
people have organized volunteering opportunities. At eBay, we used to get sabbaticals, so I used to take that and go and volunteer in Africa. So you'd get a month off with pay every 5 years, and I was to go and like volunteer in different parts of the world. Really great
Fantastic.
one. Opportunity now for you to talk about anything I haven't asked you about. Anything else you want to talk about coming up in the next few months in the autumn, especially?
Sure. I should also mention that, so I'm the chair of the Greater Manchester Social Value Network within Greater Manchester. There's a number of events that we've got coming up over the next couple of months, so do keep an eye out on LinkedIn and the Greater Manchester Social Value Network website. We also have a number of social value events, particularly around volunteering, coming up, which can be found on the Business Growth Hub website as well, which we can share the links for, I'm sure. The increase in rates of modern slavery and labour exploitation is unfortunately becoming more apparent across the country. The immigration bill that was passed and the implication that's going to have potentially on people at risk or victims of modern slavery as well. Rates have increased, but I should also caveat that rates have increased of labour exploitation as a whole in the area. That's also potentially due to raising awareness about it, so people are more confident around how they raise concerns and where they need to raise concerns. So there's something called the National Referral Mechanism, and there's apps such as the Unseen app. There's your local police stations or GMP who run cases, and if you wanted any information around understanding what exploitation is, there's the Slave Free Alliance, which is a charity under the banner of Hope for Justice, which is based in the city centre of Manchester as well. They do some fantastic work. It is a real concern to me, not just because of my focus of developing and supporting young people, just across the board. If you are listening and not aware of exploitation or modern slavery and you think, surely that still doesn't exist anymore, please do have a read of it and have a research on it, because it is a live issue, and unfortunately we are seeing increased cases of it. So try and understand the subject, and if you need any support and advice, the organisations that I've mentioned can certainly help with that.
Thank you for highlighting this very important issue. So I come to my signature questions that I ask all my guests. Can you describe the Mancunian spirit in a word or a phrase?
I could say mate. Mate is a common term that I hear all the time that I use. It puts people at ease. I think it shows a level of collaboration, community. It's used by everyone around Manchester. So mate for me means a lot of different things. That togetherness, the ability that I found within my career of being able to lean on someone for advice and support in a friendly way, breaking down barriers and understanding things through working with organisation and partners. And unfortunately, COVID happened and that was awful. But I do think if there was any positives to come from that, it has relaxed people a little bit more informal, even more so within Manchester. And I think the business mask slips a little bit, and like we're doing now, you see into people's homes, you get to know people. Amazon are knocking at the door, you've got kids running around, you see into people's lives. And I think that informal nature alongside the spirit that was already in the area is just great for everybody. I would hate to see that disappear.
I love that very much, because you're the first person who's used this term to describe the Mancunian spirit. It is so true, and it is like you said, it's just everything. It's community, it's informality. It's a great way to talk about it. Can you share a Mancunian who's inspired you and why? And can be somebody from the past or somebody present.
When I first started out in my sports coaching and getting into sport, I had a manager called Danielle, and I just could see the way that she interacted with people. I could see the way that the kids just loved being around her and really thrived off her energy. She was imparting knowledge, and she was always thinking about how she can better her services, how she can provide more opportunities for those young people. And I thought, wow, if I can be anything like that. And I think that's something I've always thought about in my career is I'd like to think everything I do has a positive impact. And if it's not, I'll continue to review that. But how can I make it better? What opportunities can we provide on a day-to-day basis? And I think Danielle was my first proper job, if you like. But I think having somebody like that for a passion for young people like I have has just been great impact for me. She gave me the opportunity to work with young people, which I'm forever grateful for. Still speak to her now. I just think it's fantastic what she did and what she did for me in those early stages as well.
Great shout out to Danielle, and you must share the podcast with her later.
Yes, absolutely.
What's the most important life lesson you've learned?
I would say common sense is not common.
So true.
If you ask my wife, she'd probably say the same thing about me as well, to be fair. I think we get caught up in buzzwords that we use, terms that we use, phrases that we use, and there's a perception that everyone's going to know what they are. And just taking a step back and thinking, how can I simplify this to anyone that I'm speaking to? And likewise, we've all sat in meetings and calls and thought, I don't know what that means. But and you don't want to ask, you'd feel a little bit embarrassed. You think, well, I should probably know what that is. And I think if we just simplified a lot of things, I think it would be far easier. We'd make a lot more progress if we did that as well. So I've found common sense is not common. And I think we often try to complicate things when they don't need to be. So if we can strip everything back and just be a little bit more simplistic, I think we would all be a lot better off.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more with what you said, because you're so right. We put little boxes on things and we package things in different ways, and we use all these big models, and sometimes we don't need to.
Absolutely.
If you could have one superpower, what would it be?
Oh, wow. I like the idea of teleporting. I've always liked the idea of exploring, even more so now the fact that I've got children. I think exposing them to different things and different places, different cultures, the idea of quickly getting from A to B.
I think teleporting and flying, these are the two very common ones that do come
Yeah.
out. It totally makes sense. Sometimes the travel's lovely, but sometimes we're like, let's do away with the in between bits. It's a waste of time.
Absolutely.
Is there a funny story you'd like to share with listeners to end the podcast?
Just when we were talking about young people before and exposure to workplace, I won't mention the organisation, but I'm really into sport. We got matched when we were in school to volunteering opportunity and work placement, and I got matched with this sports club. And I thought, great, this would be fantastic. So I got there and it sounded really good at first. They had a press conference for something to do with a football club that was on Sky Sports News. And I thought, wow, this is fantastic. And then I think 3 days later, they tried to get me to, I did refuse at the time, but they tried to get me to dress up as the mascot and hand out tickets in town centre. And I thought, surely this can't be what people do on a day-to-day basis. But it just was a real eye-opener for me then, thinking, I don't know if I want to do this. I don't know if sports, for me, thankfully, it didn't deter me enough to turn my back on it altogether. But thankfully, I'd like to think work placements and work experience for young people have come a long way since then. At least I hope they have. And for any employers out there, please don't do that for any young people that, are coming to your organisation. Please make it worthwhile.
No, absolutely. I think this is really important. It's that first impression. They've got only maybe 30 days to make a good impression. So, try and give them meaningful work. Definitely. Don't give them the mascots and filing and reports that nobody's going to read. Thank you so much, Matt, for talking to me today. It's been a real pleasure. And thank you for explaining what social value is to me and my listeners.
I've really enjoyed it. Thanks so much.
Matt, thank you for talking to me today. I really enjoyed learning about social value today, or doing good for the community. Dear listener, thank you so much for listening to the second episode of the Meet the Mancunian podcast, Season 6. Tune in every Tuesday for a new episode, or log on to www.meetthemancunian.co.uk to listen to all the episodes and learn more about my podcasting story. Next week, on Tuesday, 19 September 2023, I speak to Corinne Bell about reducing food wastage creatively. Thank you for joining me on this enriching journey through the social impact stories of Manchester with the 6th season of the Meet the Mancunian podcast. I hope the stories you've heard today have sparked a fire of inspiration within you. May they serve as a gentle reminder that no dream is too big and no passion too small. Your feedback means the world to me. Visit www.meetthemancunian.co.uk to share your thoughts, suggestions, and the causes that touched your heart. Your input helps me craft a podcast that truly touches hearts and makes a difference in our community. Stay connected with the podcast on social media. You can find us at @MeetTheMancunian on Instagram and Facebook, or follow us on Twitter as @MancunianPod. Sharing and leaving a comment would be a fantastic way to spread the word and build a vibrant community of change makers. Before I sign off, remember to introduce this podcast to your friends and family. Together we can amplify the impact and reach of these incredible stories. Once again, thank you so much for being a part of the Meet the Mancunian family. Your support fuels my passion, and I can't wait to bring you more compelling stories that will touch your heart and fuel your soul. Until we meet again in the next episode, let's keep creating waves of change together. Remember, the world needs more Mancunian spirit, so go out there and be the change you wish to see. Take care, stay inspired.
I use Zencaster to record.
Looking for a fun way to win up to 25 times your money this football season? Test your skills on Prize Picks, the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Just select 2 or more players, pick more or less on their projection for a wide variety of statistics, and place your entry. It's as easy as that. If you have the skills, you can turn $10 into $250 with just a few taps. Easy gameplay, quick withdrawals, and an enormous selection of players and stat options are what make Prize Picks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. Ready to test your skills? Join the Prize Picks community of more than 7 million football fans who have already signed up. Right now, Prize Picks will match your first deposit up to $100. Just visit prizepicks.com/get100 and use code GET100. That's code GET100 at prizepicks.com/get100 for a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks, daily fantasy sports made easy.